My friend David disappeared last year, and no one's been able to explain it. I still replay that night over and over, wondering if there was something I could have done to stop it, or if there was any way I could have ever understood it. It was a cold November night. We were heading home from a small party in the next town, one of those quiet get-togethers where everyone knew each other. David had been acting strange all night, restless, distracted. On the drive back, he was quiet, staring out the window as the dark countryside blurred past. We took a shortcut, a winding road through dense woods that stretched for miles. It was so quiet out there that night, with no other cars, no lights, not even the usual sounds of animals or rustling leaves. Just this eerie, dead silence that settled over everything. And then, out of nowhere, David told me to pull over, said he needed to get some air. The request caught me off guard. We were miles from the nearest house with nothing but trees around us. I asked him if he was feeling all right, but he just nodded and insisted. So I pulled over. David stepped out, leaving his door open, and walked a few paces into the field by the road, staring out into the dark. I watched him from the car, a little uneasy. Something about the way he was standing. The way he kept his hands in his pockets and wouldn't turn around. I don't know. It just felt wrong. After a minute, I rolled down the window and called out, "David, everything all right?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look back. He just stood there, looking into the distance as if he saw something I couldn't see. Then he did something that still haunts me. He whispered something. At least I think he did. The words were too soft for me to make out, but I swear I saw his lips move. It was like he was having a conversation with someone, or something, that wasn't there. I called his name again, louder this time, and finally he turned around, but there was this look on his face I'd never seen before. A kind of vacant expression, like he wasn't really seeing me, just looking through me. Then he turned back to the field and kept walking. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the trees. By now my heart was pounding. I was about to get out and go after him, but something stopped me. The air around me felt thick, heavy, like the quiet itself was pressing down on me, warning me to stay back. I waited, expecting him to come back, or at least to hear his footsteps crunching through the fallen leaves. But there was only silence. I yelled for him, my voice echoing into the emptiness, but there was no answer. Then I heard a strange noise, a faint rustling like someone shifting through the leaves. It was coming from deeper in the woods, far from where David had been. My heart leapt, thinking maybe it was him. I stepped out of the car, but as I moved closer, I realized the noise wasn't quite right. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic, like something pacing back and forth. I was rooted in place, torn between going in and staying back. That's when I saw them. Footprints. They led off the road into the woods. But the strange part was they weren't David's footprints. They were larger, spaced in a way that didn't look natural, almost like they belonged to something that wasn't used to walking on two legs. I backed away, panic flooding over me. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to get back in the car and drive. But I couldn't leave without David. I shouted his name one last time, my voice cracking in the cold, dead air. Then, all at once, the footsteps stopped. The silence was absolute, like the whole forest was holding its breath. And then I saw something in the tree's shadow, just at the edge of my vision, watching me. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel it staring at me with this quiet intensity, like it was daring me to come closer. I stumbled back into the car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I felt like I was being watched, followed, like that shadow was hovering just outside the window. But when I looked back, the woods were empty. No shadow, no footprints, no David. I stayed in the car all night, waiting, terrified of what might happen if I stepped back out into the dark. When the first light of dawn broke, I got out and searched the woods, hoping he'd come back, or that I'd see some sign of him. But there was nothing. Not a single footprint or broken branch to show he'd even been there. Just the strange, empty quiet. They never found David. The police searched for weeks, but there wasn't a single trace of him. No signs of a struggle, no clues. Just gone. His parents couldn't bear it. They moved away a few months after that, but I stayed. I needed answers. Every now and then I go back to that road, standing there where he disappeared, listening to the quiet. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear those strange, rhythmic footsteps echoing through the trees. And sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I swear I can hear him, whispering my name from somewhere deep in the darkness, as if he's still out there, waiting for me to follow. And even now, part of me wonders what would have happened if I had. A few weeks ago, I found an old, leather-bound journal in a box of things left in my attic by the house's previous owner. I'd been living here for months, and I hadn't noticed it before. The journal was plain but worn, as if it had been carried around a long time. I was curious, so I opened it. The first few pages were blank, except for a date in the corner, June 3rd. It was that day's date. I chalked it up to coincidence and kept reading, but as I flipped the pages, I noticed something strange. On the next page, written in messy scrawl, was the phrase, "You're not alone." I felt a chill, but I pushed it aside, assuming it was just someone's forgotten, cryptic musings. The following day, I picked it up again, and to my shock, there was new writing. "You'll hear footsteps tonight. Don't follow them." I stared at the page, heart pounding. The handwriting matched the entry from before, but I knew I hadn't written it. My first thought was that someone was messing with me, though I couldn't imagine how. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks and put the journal away. That night, around midnight, I heard faint footsteps upstairs, slow, measured steps moving from room to room. I was alone in the house, and every instinct screamed at me to hide. The journal's warning echoed in my mind, and I stayed frozen in my bed, clutching the covers. Eventually the footsteps faded, and I lay awake until dawn. The next morning, trembling, I opened the journal again. A fresh message waited on the page. "You did well. Now don't leave the house tonight." My heart raced as I read the words, feeling an irrational urge to obey. By this point, the journal's eerie instructions had me completely on edge. I tried throwing it away, even burning it, but each time I'd find it back on my nightstand, seemingly untouched. The entries continued. Some were short, cryptic commands, "Don't turn around." Others were more detailed, unsettling descriptions of things I'd see throughout the day. A broken cup, a missed call, a stranger who'd smile but never speak. Everything the journal described would come true in chilling accuracy. One night, the journal left a different message: "Do not enter the basement." I'd always avoided it. Anyway, a creepy, narrow space with shelves of dust-covered jars and tools. But with this new warning, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened the basement door and flicked on the light, my heart hammering. As I took the first step, I noticed something odd on the wall, a smear of what looked like dirt, leading down the stairs. Slowly, I followed it, each step creaking under my weight. At the bottom, the smear led to an old, dusty mirror leaned against the wall, and that's when I saw it. There, in the reflection, stood a figure, a shadowy version of myself, staring back, its eyes empty and hollow. I staggered back, feeling an overwhelming dread as the figure raised its hand, mimicking my movements. I turned to run, but before I could take a step, the reflection whispered, "Welcome home." The next morning, I found one last entry in the journal: "You belong here now." The journal hasn't written anything since. Every morning I wake up hoping I'll find a new message that will tell me how to escape. But I think I already know the truth. This house doesn't want me to leave. And sometimes in the silence, I still hear the faint echo of footsteps, as if it's reminding me that I can't ever leave. It started 2 weeks ago. Every night around 3 a.m., I'd wake up to the sound of tapping on my bedroom window. It was a slow, deliberate tap-tap, as if someone wanted to make sure I was awake. My bedroom is on the second floor, so there's no way anyone could be reaching up there. At first, I thought it was a branch, maybe wind pushing it against the glass. But when I looked, there was nothing there. The tapping continued night after night, always at the same time. Tap-tap. I tried ignoring it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the sound was so clear, so persistent. It seemed to linger in my ears even after it stopped. Then, a few nights ago, I worked up the courage to look outside right when I heard it. Slowly, I crept over to the window, heart pounding. I held my breath and peeked through the blinds. What I saw chilled me to the bone. There, just beyond the glass, was a face staring back at me. It was pale, almost ghostly, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to sink deep into the skull. Its mouth was twisted into an unnatural grin, stretched wide as if it knew something I didn't. And as it stared, its hand reached out, its bony fingers tapping rhythmically against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled back, too terrified to scream. I stayed up the rest of the night, sitting in the corner with the lights on, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But the next morning I found fingerprints on the glass, long, thin prints that didn't match any hand I'd ever seen. I tried to brush it off as a strange prank, but the tapping came back the following night. This time it was louder, more insistent. Tap, tap. I didn't dare look out again, but I could feel its gaze on me, like it was waiting for me to come closer. Then, last night, the tapping changed. It was no longer a rhythmic tap. Instead, it sounded like scratching, as if claws were dragging across the glass, trying to find a way inside. I lay there frozen, listening as the scratching grew louder, more frantic. This morning I checked the window and found deep grooves etched into the glass, thin lines that ran down the length of the pane. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to leave, but a darker part wonders what would happen if I opened the window, if I finally let it in. Tonight, I'll find out.